The ice stretched endlessly in every direction, a cold white ocean that seemed to go on forever. The wind whispered across the frozen plains, carrying with it the faint sound of shifting glaciers and the occasional crack of ice under pressure. Scientists had always known that Antarctica held secrets from the past, but nothing had prepared them for what lay buried deep beneath the frozen surface. A small team of researchers had been working for months to drill through layers of ice as old as civilization itself. They were hoping to find signs of ancient life, maybe preserved microorganisms or traces of early human history. The last thing anyone expected was a human, frozen in perfect condition, suspended in time for centuries. When the drill finally broke through the thick ice and the team reached the cavern below, their flashlights illuminated a sight that no one could have imagined. There, encased in a crystal-clear block of ice, was a man, not just any man, but one whose presence seemed to radiate a strange energy. His face was calm, his features sharp, and his body, though frozen, showed signs of exceptional strength. Dr. Elena Morales, the team leader, stared at him in disbelief. He looks alive, she whispered, almost afraid to speak the words aloud. Her assistant, Ravi, shook his head. But how? He's been frozen for hundreds of years. That's impossible. Elena didn't respond. She had been a scientist long enough to know that nature often surprised humanity in ways that defied explanation. Carefully, the team began the slow process of melting the ice around him, making sure to preserve every detail of the man within. Hours passed, and finally, the ice gave way. The man fell gently onto the soft mats they had prepared, his body trembling but unharmed. He opened his eyes, revealing deep, clear eyes that seemed to carry the knowledge of 1,000 years. He looked around slowly, taking in his surroundings, his gaze moving from the ceiling of the cavern to the stunned faces of the scientists. He spoke, but only a word. Where? His voice was calm, yet strong, and carried a sense of authority that immediately drew attention. Dr. Morales stepped forward cautiously. You are safe. You've been frozen for a very long time. You are on Earth in the future. We are scientists. We found you buried in the ice. The man's eyes widened slightly and he tried to speak again. This time he asked, the world? How has it changed? Ravi swallowed hard. Changed? A lot. You've missed centuries. For a moment the man said nothing. He looked down at his hands, then at the equipment around him, the computers and the blinking lights. His mind worked quickly, absorbing the unfamiliar environment and the strange technology surrounding him. Though he had come from a past long gone, his mind adapted, instinctively analyzing and learning from every detail. Elena noticed his gaze lingering on a monitor displaying satellite images of Earth. You want to see the world? She asked gently. He nodded. We can show you, but it is not the same as it was when you lived. He studied the images with intensity. Forests had been replaced by cities in some areas, while others were barren, scarred by centuries of misuse. Rivers ran slower. Some had dried entirely, and the oceans, once vast and blue, were now dotted with floating cities and new technology built to protect the remaining coastlines. He saw humanity, struggling, fragmented, yet still holding on. Something stirred deep within him, a sense of responsibility, a desire to act. Over the next few days, the team worked to help him adjust. They provided clothing, food, and simple explanations of the modern world. He listened with curiosity, asking questions about machines, transportation, medicine, and the state of society. Despite centuries of separation from humanity, he quickly adapted. His memory of old techniques and survival strategies, combined with his natural intelligence, made him a fast learner. At night, he would sit quietly, staring into the distance, thinking. The ice of his past had preserved not only his body but also his sense of purpose. He had been a protector in his time, trained to face challenges and guide others. Now, centuries later, he realized the world needed guidance again, but in a new form, one that required not violence, but wisdom, ingenuity, and hope. One morning, Elena brought him to a nearby laboratory where simulations showed the effects of climate change, dwindling resources and human overpopulation. He watched, silent and focused, as the team explained the fragile state of modern civilization. Then he spoke calmly but firmly. The people, they do not know how close they are to losing everything. I must help them. Elena exchanged a glance with Ravi. Help? We can guide you, but you don't understand the complexity. The world is very different. People live in cities, trade across oceans, rely on machines for survival. Your methods, however extraordinary, may not be enough. He smiled faintly. I am not the same as I was. I will learn, adapt, and find a way. If I do not, humanity may not survive. The following weeks were a test of patience, endurance, and learning. The man, who had no name at first, was given the name Kale, after an old legend Elena had read about. Kale explored the laboratory, studied books and databases, and even practiced simple engineering tasks. His hands, though preserved for centuries, moved with precision and skill. Within days, he was helping the scientists optimize energy systems, improve water filtration, and design shelters capable of withstanding harsh climates. As Kale's confidence grew, he asked to see more of the outside world. The team hesitated at first. Antarctica was unforgiving and exposure could be dangerous, but eventually they allowed it. Wrapped in heavy coats and protective gear, Kale stepped onto the frozen plains. The wind howled, but he did not falter. He walked with purpose, studying the ice, the distant mountains, and the glacial crevasses. He moved with the grace of someone fully aware of his environment, understanding the subtle signs of danger and opportunity. During these explorations, he discovered ancient remains of settlements, tools, and even forgotten libraries buried beneath the snow. Each find fascinated him, reminding him that humanity had once achieved greatness. He made mental notes, thinking about how the wisdom of the past could be combined with the technology of the present to restore balance. One evening, as the aurora painted the sky with streaks of green and purple, Kale stood alone, looking out over the icy expanse. The wind tugged at his coat and the cold bit at his skin, but he did not flinch. He remembered the time before he had been frozen, a time when humans thrived, when communities worked together, and when knowledge was cherished. Now, centuries later, he realized that humanity was at a crossroads. Without guidance, it would fall further. With guidance, it could rise again. Kale's determination deepened. He no longer saw himself merely as a man out of time. He saw himself as a bridge, a link between centuries of human experience. The ice had preserved him, but it had also given him clarity. He understood that his mission was not to fight or conquer, but to awaken humanity's potential, to remind them of what they could achieve when they worked together, and to inspire hope in a world that had almost forgotten it. When Kale returned to the laboratory, Elena noticed the change in him. He walked taller, spoke with confidence, and carried an energy that seemed to brighten the room. I am ready, he said simply. I must see the cities, meet the people, and understand their struggles. Only then can I help them. Elena felt a mix of awe and concern. The world is not the same as it was. There are dangers, complexities, challenges you cannot imagine. Are you sure you are ready for this? Kale nodded. I was frozen, yes. But I'm awake now, and I will not wait any longer. Humanity needs its final warrior, not one who fights with weapons, but one who leads with knowledge, courage, and hope. And so, Kale prepared to leave the icy wasteland of Antarctica. His journey was just beginning. The frozen past had awakened within him a sense of purpose stronger than any storm, colder than any ice, and brighter than any light. Humanity had survived centuries, but it was still fragile. Kale knew he would face challenges unlike any he had imagined. Yet, with every step into the world beyond the ice, he carried with him the promise of a new beginning, a chance to guide humanity back to greatness. As he stepped into the rising sun, illuminating the endless white horizon, Kale felt a strange thrill. The world was vast, uncertain, and full of unknowns. But for the first time in centuries, he felt alive, determined, and ready. The story of humanity's final warrior had begun, not with a battle, but with awakening, understanding, and the quiet strength to inspire a better future. Kale had left the icy plains behind, moving toward the distant cities that dotted the horizon. The journey was long and filled with challenges, but he welcomed each step. Every snow-covered mountain and frozen river he crossed had reminded him of the old world, of what humans were capable of when they worked together. Now, he needed to see the present, how people survived, what they had lost, and what could be saved. As he traveled south toward the first human settlement, Kale noticed how the world had changed. Roads were cracked and overgrown in some places, while in others shiny highways connected distant cities. Small pockets of greenery still existed, though they were carefully preserved by humans who had learned through trial and error to protect what remained of nature. Despite the beauty of these green spaces, he could see the toll of centuries of neglect. Rivers ran slow, the air was heavier in some regions, and the sun seemed weaker against layers of pollution in the distant atmosphere. He reached a small settlement, nestled between mountains and a river that still carried fresh water. Smoke rose from chimneys and he could hear the faint laughter of children playing. He approached carefully, curious about how humans lived in this part of the world. As he entered the town, people stopped what they were doing to stare. They had never seen anyone like him, tall, strong, and with a presence that seemed both ancient and commanding. One woman, carrying a basket of vegetables, stepped forward. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I am Kale," he said, speaking clearly and calmly. "I have come to understand your world and help if I can." Her eyes narrowed, unsure whether to trust him, but there was something in his voice that made her pause. He did not demand, he did not threaten. He only offered his presence and his knowledge. Slowly she nodded. "I am Mira, perhaps you can help us. Life is difficult here. Our crops are failing, and the river has been unpredictable this year." Kyle followed her to the fields. The soil was dry in some places and cracked in others. Small patches of vegetables and grains grew, but they were weak and sparse. Kale knelt, feeling the soil between his hands, examining its texture and moisture. He could tell why the crops were struggling. Poor soil health, uneven irrigation, and changing weather patterns. "I can help," Kale said. "We can improve the soil, store water better, and grow more food than before. But we must work together." Over the next few days, Kale taught the villagers techniques that had been lost over centuries. He showed them how to mix natural compost, rotate crops to preserve nutrients, and collect water efficiently. Using simple tools and the limited technology they had, he guided them to build small canals, water reservoirs, and protective greenhouses. At first, the villagers were skeptical. They had survived on small harvests for years and had little hope of improving their situation. But Kale's patience and understanding slowly won them over. He worked alongside them, never commanding, never criticizing, only guiding. Children watched in fascination as he demonstrated planting methods, and elders listened as he shared stories of old human ingenuity. One evening, as the village gathered around a fire, Kale spoke softly. "Humans have always faced challenges," he said. "But in the past you learned to work together, to share knowledge, and to care for one another. That is how you thrive. That is how humanity survives." Mira looked at him, her eyes wide. You make it sound simple, but life is complicated now. People are scattered, cities are large, and resources are limited. How can one person help all of humanity?" Kale smiled faintly. "I do not need to do it alone. I can teach, guide, and inspire, and those who learn will teach others. The knowledge spreads like water in a river. It starts small, but it grows, and soon it reaches everywhere." The villagers began to follow his guidance more actively. Fields grew greener, and the first small harvests arrived. The people celebrated, not just because of the food, but because they had regained hope. Kale had reminded them of their ability to create, to nurture, and to survive. He had shown them that the world was not beyond saving. After several weeks, Kale continued his journey, leaving the village stronger than he had found it. He traveled toward larger cities where he could see the challenges were greater. Urban areas were crowded, energy scarce, and pollution higher. Yet he saw opportunity. Buildings had solar panels and wind turbines, but their efficiency was low. He noticed areas where greenery could be restored, water could be stored, and communities could work together to improve life. In one city, Kale met a young engineer named Lena. She was struggling to repair a water purification system that supplied the city. The pipes were old, and the filters were failing. Kyle studied the system with her, quickly identifying weak points and suggesting small improvements. With his guidance, Lena rebuilt the system using materials available in the city. When water flowed clearly and efficiently once more, the community gathered to thank them. Kale's influence grew quietly, steadily. People began to trust him, seeking his advice on agriculture, engineering, energy, and education. Wherever he went, he encouraged cooperation, reminding people that working together was stronger than working alone. Slowly, a network of communities began to form, linked not by politics or power but by shared knowledge and mutual care. As he traveled, Cale observed the younger generation. Children were curious, quick to learn, and eager to help. He spent hours teaching them basic principles of science, sustainable living, and problem-solving. The children listened attentively, absorbing the lessons with excitement. They asked questions, experimented, and shared their discoveries with their families. Cale realized that they were humanity's greatest hope, the ones who would carry knowledge into the future and ensure the survival of their species. One afternoon, Cale visited a forested region near a river delta. The trees were young, newly planted by local communities, and the air was alive with birdsong. He paused by the water, watching the flow of the river. It reminded him of the rivers in his own time, clear and full of life. He thought about how humanity had once lived in harmony with nature, and how even now it was possible to restore that balance. Kyle met an elderly woman named Amara, who had lived through decades of hardship. She had seen cities rise and fall, rivers dry and forests disappear, yet she still had hope. "You have brought energy and guidance to our people," she said. "But can we truly change the world? Can we undo the mistakes of centuries?" Cale looked at her calmly. "We cannot undo the past, but we can shape the future. Every small action, every community that learns to work together, adds to the greater whole. Change does not happen all at once. It grows slowly, like a tree from a seed. But if we care, if we teach, if we inspire, it will grow strong and endure." Amara nodded, understanding the truth in his words. Cale spent the day helping her community build irrigation systems and plant new trees along the riverbanks. By the time he left, the village was thriving, not because of him alone, but because they had learned how to work together, to care for their land, and to trust in their abilities. As days turned into weeks, Cale continued his journey. He crossed plains, climbed hills, and entered cities, always observing, learning, and teaching. People began to recognize him, sharing news of his presence from one settlement to the next. They spoke of the warrior who did not fight, but who inspired and guided. He became a symbol of hope, a reminder that humanity was capable of greatness even after centuries of struggle. At night, Cale often sat by a fire, thinking about the world and its future. The challenges were immense: climate change, dwindling resources, fragmented societies. But he had seen how communities could grow stronger when they worked together. He thought about the children he had taught, the engineers he had guided, and the farmers who had learned to restore their land. He realized that the key to survival was not power, wealth, or technology alone. It was cooperation, knowledge, and hope. One evening, as he camped on a hill overlooking a city lit by solar lamps, Kyle spoke quietly to himself. "The world is ready to change. It is ready to rise again. Humanity has not forgotten how to thrive, it only needs a reminder." And so Cale continued his journey, moving from settlement to settlement, city to city. Wherever he went, he left behind a spark, small improvements, renewed hope, and the knowledge that humans were capable of shaping their own destiny. Each community that embraced his guidance became stronger, more resilient, and more connected to others. Cale understood that his role was not to rule, to command, or to fight. It was to awaken the potential within each person, to inspire them to care for their world, and to teach them that cooperation could overcome the greatest challenges. He was a warrior, yes, but not of battle. He was a warrior of knowledge, patience, and hope. By the time he reached the edge of a great river that divided two sprawling cities, Cale had seen enough to know that humanity was ready. The journey ahead would be long and challenges would continue to appear. But he also knew that humans were resilient, resourceful, and capable of greatness. He stood on the riverbank watching the water flow and felt a sense of quiet determination. He had awakened from centuries of ice, but now he had awakened humanity as well, not through force, but through guidance, care, and inspiration. The final warrior was no longer alone. Humanity was ready to rise again. Kyle stood on the hill overlooking the two cities divided by the wide, flowing river. From this height, he could see the lives of thousands of people unfolding below. The cities were different yet similar, one bright with solar energy and orderly streets, the other older with worn buildings and narrow alleys. Both held people struggling to survive, to find meaning, and to connect with each other. He had traveled far, teaching, guiding, and inspiring. Villages had learned to grow food efficiently, cities had begun to restore clean water systems, and communities had discovered the power of cooperation. Now Cale realized that the next step was to unite these isolated groups, to help humanity see that their strength lay in working together, not apart. He descended the hill and approached the riverbank, where a small ferry carried people across. Children laughed and waved as he passed, recognizing him from the stories their families had shared. He smiled gently, feeling the hope that had grown from these small, careful steps. The first task was to meet the leaders of each city. Cale requested an audience with them, explaining that he wished to discuss cooperation and shared resources. At first they were skeptical. Leaders were used to rivalry, competition for scarce resources, and maintaining their own authority. But Cale's calm presence, combined with his proven record of helping communities thrive, earned their attention. "Your cities are stronger than they seem," he told them. "But alone each faces limits. Together you can solve problems that seem impossible. Water, energy, food, education, all can be shared and improved. If you cooperate, your people will not only survive but flourish." The leaders exchanged glances, unsure. "You speak of unity," said one, "but our histories are different. Our priorities are different. Can we truly work together?" Cale nodded. "Yes, if you remember the lesson of the villages and towns I have visited. Cooperation is not about losing identity or control. It is about sharing knowledge, resources, and trust. Small steps create great change." Over the next weeks, Cale worked with engineers, city planners, and community leaders. He guided them in creating systems that allowed water to flow from the richer areas to the poorer ones without conflict, distributed food efficiently, and used renewable energy more effectively. Where roads had crumbled, he helped design simple transportation networks that connected the cities, making trade and communication easier. Children, too, played a role in this transformation. Cale had taught them science, problem-solving, and the importance of caring for their world. They shared what they learned with their families, spreading knowledge like seeds in fertile soil. Soon the people began to see that Cale's vision was possible, that unity and cooperation could truly bring prosperity. During this time, Cale noticed something else. As communities grew stronger, they also became happier. Families laughed more. Neighbors helped each other without hesitation, and even the elders found renewed purpose. Cale understood that success was not measured by wealth or power, but by the quality of life, the connections between people, and the sense of hope that grew in every heart. One day, as he walked along a restored riverbank lined with young trees, Cale encountered a group of children building a small bridge across a stream. Their laughter echoed across the water. "We want to connect our school to the next town," one child explained. "We thought if we could build a bridge ourselves, we could make it happen." Cale knelt beside them, helping with simple calculations and showing them how to support the structure safely. "See," he said softly, "you are already doing what I hoped to teach. Knowledge, patience, and teamwork create solutions that no single person could achieve alone." The children beamed. "We can do more," another said. "We can help our families too." Cale smiled, realizing that this small act symbolized everything he had worked toward. The spark of cooperation had grown into a fire, spreading across generations. It was not just a physical bridge. They were building a bridge of understanding, trust, and hope. As the weeks turned into months, Cale continued to travel between cities, towns, and villages. News of his work spread further, reaching distant communities. People who had been isolated for decades began to communicate, exchange knowledge, and support one another. Cale's efforts created a web of connection, uniting humanity in ways that had seemed impossible. During this time, Cale also encouraged innovation. He taught engineers to combine old techniques with modern technology. Farmers learned to use natural fertilizers alongside efficient irrigation. Teachers in schools integrated lessons from the past and present, giving students a well-rounded understanding of the world. Slowly, society began to resemble a network of flourishing communities, rather than isolated pockets of survival. One evening, Cale sat with Mira and Lena by a campfire outside one of the cities. The sun had set, and the sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink. The three of them watched the lights of the city flicker on, powered by clean energy systems that Cale had helped implement. "You have changed everything," Mira said softly, her eyes shining. "We were losing hope, but now Now we believe we can do more. Kale shook his head gently. I did not change everything, you did. I only reminded you of what you already could do. The strength was always within humanity. I only helped it grow. Lena smiled. Still, your guidance has made a difference. People trust each other more, work together, and even think about the future differently. That is not small. Kale looked at the city lights and then at the horizon. It is a beginning. The world is vast. There are still challenges ahead. But if people continue to learn, to care for each other and to build wisely, humanity will rise stronger than before. He stood walking toward the city and noticed families working together to build a new school, planting trees along the streets and helping each other repair homes. He felt a quiet pride. For centuries he had been frozen in ice, waiting. Now he saw the true potential of humans, their creativity, their resilience, and their capacity for hope. In the following months, Kyle helped organize a council of community leaders. They met regularly to discuss problems, share ideas, and plan solutions collaboratively. This council was not about control or authority. It was about cooperation. Together they made decisions about energy, water, education, and transportation. Slowly, their combined efforts began to transform entire regions. People who had once felt powerless now had a voice. They contributed ideas, shared knowledge, and celebrated successes together. Kale encouraged them to see themselves as part of something greater, a human family connected by shared responsibility and care for the world. One day, as he walked along a wide river that now flowed clean and clear, Kale reflected on how far humanity had come. The ice of the past had preserved him, but it had also preserved a sense of purpose. His mission was not to conquer, but to awaken potential, to remind humanity of their capacity for greatness, and it was working. Children played along the riverbank, learning to fish sustainably, plant trees, and care for the environment. Adults worked side by side to repair buildings, create gardens, and build infrastructure. Knowledge and wisdom flowed freely, passed from one generation to the next. Kyle realized that this was the true meaning of being a warrior, not fighting enemies, but guiding people to realize their own strength and resilience. In the evenings, communities gathered to share stories and celebrate accomplishments. Music and laughter filled the air, and Kale watched with satisfaction as humans rebuilt not only their environment, but also their sense of connection and purpose. He understood that the journey was ongoing, that challenges would continue to arise, but humanity had learned the greatest lesson: unity, cooperation, and hope could overcome any obstacle. Months later, Kyle returned to the first village he had helped. The fields were lush, the water clean, and the people thriving. Mira greeted him warmly. "You have given us more than guidance," she said. "You have shown us what we can do when we believe in ourselves and each other." Kale smiled. "The work was always yours. I only helped you see it. Remember, the future belongs to those who learn, care, and act together." He stood quietly for a moment, looking at the village, the surrounding forests, and the river glistening in the sunlight. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The mission that had begun centuries ago, frozen in ice, was now unfolding in ways he had never imagined. Humanity was awakening, not through force, but through inspiration, knowledge, and shared purpose. Kale continued to travel, visiting regions far and wide, leaving behind communities strengthened and connected. Slowly, the world transformed. Cities became centers of learning and cooperation. Villages flourished with sustainable practices, and nature began to reclaim its place alongside human civilization. As he stood on a hill at sunset, watching a world slowly healing and thriving, Kale realized the truth he had always known. The role of the warrior was not to fight or conquer. It was to awaken, guide, and inspire. Humanity had survived centuries, but now it was ready to rise, to reach its full potential, united, wise, and strong. Kale smiled softly. The final warrior had completed his mission, not with weapons or battles, but with patience, knowledge, and hope. And as the wind carried the sounds of laughter, song, and life across the valleys below, he knew that humanity's renaissance had begun. The world was no longer a place of despair.